Turn it up. Hey. Look, my wife and I, so far we put out 3 books and they 5 stars, cause we educating the tribe up. 100 years at the 100 years, they done lied to us, but we wised up. The first book got them haters shook, cause it's up on my people, take a drive up. Memory lane, down memory lane, remember everything, watch it line up. And the second book, we exposed it all, had them gatekeepers going, how but? Predictable, they was fictional. All I heard getting that lies piled up. In the third book, we was riled up, like a car's engine with his mouths up. They lied that said that we came from Africa when that's where they came from round, bro. Hey, finding out all on your own is what I highly recommend and suggest. And if you looking for answers and content by me, I highly recommend you the best, which is my website at the link you see just across the screen. Don't let it miss you, I make it simple. I double down on that black and white. It's too official. Oh, see you everyone, how y'all doing? Look, we getting geared up and everything to head back into the live streaming here on the channel. And I wanted to go ahead and answer everybody. A lot of people were asking me to clip up the past live streams that I didn't get a chance to clip up. Here you are. There's going to be a few of these, but in between those times, I'm going to be live streaming a course. And inside of the 13% community server, I'm going to announce the days that I'm going to be going live. The majority of them will be at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So just be on the lookout for that. That's going to happen here very, very shortly. So I hope you all are doing well. I miss you all. I'm going to drop a bomb for you all. Give you all a round of applause at the same time. Y'all deserve it. Hey, man. So without further ado, man, we're gonna get right into it, all right?
It's go time, Slim.
It's up.
Let's go. Written and researched by Mr. and Mrs. Calloway. Let me drop a bomb for my wife.
Of so-called African Americans are struggling to come to grips with their true identity, culture, heritage, and history, mainly due to the numerous manipulative tactics utilized to govern their critical thinking mechanisms and to also decimate their literacy capabilities. Each one of these manipulative social engineering experiments can only be detected and detached from one's subconscious when standing outside of the box. I'll let you ponder on what's happening to those that are still inside of it. Meanwhile, you have not and will not ever hear me promote any form of religion throughout any of my content that I present to the public.
Reason being
is due to religion, faith, and beliefs being based on one's personal relationships. And I am not here to debate nor argue about who you should or should not love.
Y'all heard me, right? So to the religious people out there, I'm not here for that.
That's simply none of my business. So let's also be sure to not confuse the truth that I present throughout my content with any personal beliefs that you may have. Now in this segment, you will learn about who you truly are and where you really came from based on truthful information. Because mind you, there is a big difference between truth and facts. Facts are merely controversial information, whereas a person bears the opinion to debate its credibility or not. That's yet another form of belief. Whereas the truth is non-debatable due to its credibility of always making logical sense. This is why in today's society, most people don't even care about the truth. Why? Well, because to them, unfortunately, a lie is more entertaining.
King Third, what's going on, brother?
So now let's start with March 1st, 1790, when then President George Washington and Vice President John Adams, along with Speaker of the House Frederick Muhlenberg, signed the 1790 Census Act. According to the census itself, it states that the 1790 Census Act is a law that, quote, required that every household be visited that completed census schedules be posted in 2 of the most public places within each jurisdiction, there to remain for the inspection of all concerned, and that the aggregate amount of each description of persons for every district be transmitted to the president.
Hold up. I want y'all to note that in 1790, the completed census schedules to be posted in 2 of the most public places within each jurisdiction. What are they referring to right there? So in 1790, the most public places within each jurisdiction. What jurisdiction? Are they referring to counties? Are they referring to districts? 1790. I'm looking in the chat. Each jurisdiction. Okay, so required that every household be visited, that completed census schedules be posted in 2 of the most public places within each jurisdiction, there to remain for the inspection of all concerned. I remember, okay, I'm gonna give y'all a little hint, because I see a lot of people saying districts and counties, right? Where else would you go to post? There we go, somebody said it. The post office. There we go. People sleeping on that post office. To be posted in 2 of the most public places. I saw somebody say church, but 1790. Were we going to their churches? Were they going to our churches? City Hall. Okay. Library. That's a public place. So is the City Hall. No, not the newspapers, not just yet. 1790. Somebody said grocery stores. Restaurants. County fair. That's public. Keep in mind, 1790 though. Not Federal Reserves. Yeah, churches will be one. But how is that for everybody? When they had their own and we had our own. Keep in mind, 1790, we wouldn't in joint churches. That's why I'm telling you that the post office is very important here. It's key. And I'm trying to see if somebody say something. Schools, but segregation existed during this time. Okay, train stations is a public place. Not the local banks. Now, it wouldn't be law enforcement. It wouldn't be hotels neither. Hotels came later. Bus stations came later. Train stations were there. Town squares were there, or town halls were there. Churches were there too, but that wasn't, but keep in mind they're saying 2 of the most public places within each jurisdiction in 1790. Not the plantation, a public place. In fact, I'm glad y'all said plantation, because keep in mind, this was allegedly happening during the time period of slavery. No, not restaurants, not the sheriff's office, not auction places. The post office is one. We definitely established that. But keep in mind, they said 2 of the most public places. I'm gonna give y'all like 60 more seconds. I'm gonna see if somebody get it. All right, okay, tell you what, think of an old Western movie. I'm gonna give y'all a hint. Think of an old Western movie where they show you a town. What did that town always consist of? Of course, you have a church. You have a restaurant or 2. Federal, oh, hold on, wait, I gotta go back up. I think somebody said it. Let me see. Courthouse, nah, you close though, you close. Yes, it will be considered a message board. But this is the reason why I'm giving you the old Western style. Okay, let me say, cause I'm damn near about to tell you now. And when the person said message board, hear me out on this. In the Western movies, if somebody was the most wanted, how was that message getting around from town to town? Oh, I think somebody said it. Similar to Western Union. Close, you close, you hot. Telegram, right, okay. Now we talking, y'all. Now we talk. By poster, yeah. They'll put up posters. But they sending messages out through telegram stations or telegraph stations. I said telegram because of the MoneyGram, Western Union, but telegraph stations. Yeah, and they work similarly to a post office. Yeah, Pony Express. But that was before the newspapers, though. That was before the newspapers. Like, it was similar, but it was different. Yeah, you sort of wanted posters. But don't forget that they came, some of the marshals would come with papers in hand already. But that person verifies that information by a certain way. Telegraph communication. Yeah, they sent out bounty hunters, which will be the marshals at that time. Don't forget, the first police ever were the marshals. You had the sheriff of the town and you had the marshals of the jurisdictions. Don't forget, the marshals were responsible for the enumeration for the census. Remember, I told you, I'm not sure if I'm going to go into that here. I'm not sure, but I know I did it in my video. They wore a badge and everything. The U.S. Marshals. They were the first police, and they were responsible for enumerating. Very first. So we got the right, like working as deputies. Yeah, that's why I said Western Union, but I wanted them to understand, like, where all that stuff stemming from. Like, that's why I gave that old Western as an example. Like, think about that type of era. Because keep in mind, 1790 is not too far away from the 1800s. So now you know, like, how things ran. And they didn't come over here and build that up. It was already built up. That's another thing I wanted to point out, but they just copied things that we already had in motion. Yes, just like the post office, right? The post office is very similar.
Visited. That completed census schedules be posted in two of the most public places within each jurisdiction, there to remain for the inspection of all concerned, and that the aggregate amount of each description of persons for every district be transmitted to the president. So let me point out that some households, not all, were visited by these individuals entitled as census enumerators, also known as census takers, who are technically federal government unsupervised employees who allegedly went from town to town, city to city, and door to door, deciding who was of what race and then documented the family they meet as such. So you mean to tell me that these census takers were provided instructions by way of the government to document and record the ethnic category of various family members based on their perception of the family when they visited? And their opinions were considered to be official historical records of information? Even though they did not count every individual living within the United States due to the multiple indigenous Niji raids and rebellions occurring during this time period, the alleged first official census of the entire United States was implemented on a day dubbed as Census Day on August 2nd, 1790. See, now, what's very important to note here is that the quote, free people of color were recorded all in one group, and also note that it states free and not freed, as if they were freed people from some form of enslavement. I go into more detail about the census labels in the documentary that I'll link above right now, but I said all of that for a particular reason, and that is the official 1790 U.S. Census population count was a total of 3,929,214 people. But keep in mind that this total amount did not reflect millions of people who were indigenous to North America, aka Turtle Island, meaning they did not come from another continent, nor did it reflect the accurate total amount of so-called slaves in North America. Why? Well, the U.S. Census Agency themselves admitted to not possessing the majority of their official historical records of information that was allegedly documented between the 1790 U.S. Census and all the way up to the 1830 U.S. Census. And their excuse was to claim that these records were lost or destroyed somehow. See, this was all purposely done for two reasons. A, to hide the truth about the real history surrounding the U.S. and slavery. I mean, generally speaking, You can literally prove to yourself that your ancestors were slaves or not by documentation. You can check and see if your ancestors came off a boat. I've been sharing this information publicly for years now, along with my sources, and I still have not heard from anyone that used my instructions to trace their family that I have available on Amazon Prime and anywhere else books are sold, that one of their ancestors were documented as being a former slave. The people that reached out to me that has or is currently undergoing research on their family's history have not failed with discovering that their family members were either never enslaved and has always been free, or worked as an indentured servant for money, land ownership, business ownership, etc., and considered to be freedmen once their obligations of servitude expired. Make no mistake, when you hear the term freedman from now on, freedman does not necessarily mean that he or she was freed from enslavement, because it can also mean relieved from their duties in most commonly known cases.
This is the reason why.
First reason to allegedly.
This is the reason why you saw freedmen, white folks as freedmen as well. And this is the reason. This is another reason why I said that there was a. I'm trying to remember who it was. Somebody tried to bring this up and say we need to have a case for freedmen, but you're going to be including everyone that was considered freedmen, because by way of documentation of release from their duty, they were considered freedmen. I'm glad that I mentioned that. I actually went over this during a live stream as well and pointed out where that term came from. And that was a Christian term. It was a Christianized term. They were just trying to state that it was a group of people who accepted Christianity at that time, and they were freedmen. So it was used both ways. But yeah, if your obligations of servitude expired, that's why you would then let go. You were able to be hired again. Now, some cases they said 7 to 10 years with certain people. But certain people, depending on what area, you would need to check with your family members. Certain people were manumitted earlier than that, earlier than what their contract said. Now, that's another thing. If that happened, they had to have an indenture. An indenture is a contract. That's how you can verify if your family members were working. Or they will tell you, and you're going to have to look for that indenture. But all of that was on public record. Everybody had to keep record, because eventually, this is the reason why you saw the Civil War take place. They had to start writing that stuff down, and taxes had to be paid, just like how it is right now. This is the reason why I said that my wife and I told you that it was a labor dispute. The South did not want to have to pay taxes. Basically, that's what that was about. That was going to make everybody in the South have to pay taxes, which is going to be overloading how much they were already getting paid. They were getting paid little to nothing out there. They were still trying to come up while the union was already up. Everything was already booming and prospering. But the thing is that the South had the upper hand because they were growing the majority of the crops. So they felt as though, nah, it should go our way. This is the reason why they split from the Union States. That's what they were called originally, the Union States. But yeah, it was a labor dispute at that time. The majority of the people who were laboring were them, not really us. It was them. The majority of our people already owned land. We already owned the majority of the land at that time. And this is another reason why I said to go back and start digging. Certain people of your family members may have just sold their land, or they gave it up in taxes since the Union implemented taxes. Raised their prices up just enough where they couldn't afford it any longer. But this is the reason why I said it's so important for you to pull up your own family members' records, because you'll never know. Because if it was just land that your family owned that was sitting dormant, yeah, eventually the federal government or that local government picked it back up, but that is still owed to you. That will be owed to the descendants. Hopefully they had it in the trust, but our people were intelligent back then, utilizing trust and stuff like that. Like you need to definitely check and see if it was inside of a trust. There's multiple people that are getting their family's land back. We just got to do it. Meaning we got to put in the footwork to find out exactly what happened.
Enslavement. because it can also mean relieved from their duties in most commonly known cases. So this first reason to allegedly lose or destroy these records was to hide the truth that it was a very small amount of copper-colored slaves and a greater amount of prisoners of war in North America. And
that's why. Okay, all right.
Lose or destroy these records was to hide the truth that it was a very small amount of copper-colored slaves and a greater amount of prisoners of war in North America. And the second reason is B, to hide the truth about who are the real minority and majority in terms of the population count here in the United States of America.
And I went over that more times.
This brings me to my very next point. The biggest portion of their agenda was the abominable sabotaging of the indigenous Niji's history, legacy, languages, culture, and heritage systematically. So of course they couldn't pull this task off on their own. So they implemented a methodology format based solely on the scientific concepts of eugenics.
Yeah, hold on y'all, let me let y'all see this picture. Oh man, yeah, there we go. Let me let y'all see this picture. Hold on, where's my zoom in button? Is it this? But this is their steps. This is pulled right out of the book. The idiot is at the bottom. You would think the genius would be at the top, but the moron is at the top. Ooh, y'all. Listen. Listen. I'm gonna just let this sink in for a minute. Steps in mental development. Look at that part. Steps in mental development. This is not a game. They were conducting these surveys on all people. Now, and it was this ain't got nothing to do with the particular race. They were doing it. They started classifying people. Notice I said classify after they did studies. This is deep.
On the scientific concepts of eugenics. According to the National Archives, the term eugenics was coined by a British natural scientist and explorer named Francis Galton in the year of 1883. Now, there are two sides to every coin, so I'll be sure to flip each side over, and I'm not theoretically speaking here. Eugenics was implemented to help improve one selected group of people and their future generations to come, to overtake and oversee yet another set group of people and their future generations by way of extermination of their mindsets. This rabbit hole goes much deeper than one may assume. Allow me to simplify the explanation of this paramount method utilized by the likes of your industrialized institutions throughout America still to this very day. Eugenics literally changes everything that any person
notices with a K
was ever taught of or even thought of previously before this selection was carried out upon him or her.
Negro, African, right? They're telling you there's a difference right there. African and Negro. Look at that. The African was above and the Negro right there. We're not the same.
According to Francis Galton himself, this system would allow, quote, more suitable races or strains of blood a better chance of prevailing speedily over the less suitable, end quote. Galton was heavily influenced by the likes of an English naturalist, biologist, and the first ever self-proclaimed documented bigoted genealogist, Charles Darwin. Darwin single-handedly developed the controversial theory of human evolution, which was his belief that man came from monkeys, and then his system of natural selection, which included a heavy flux of racial derogatory.
Since 1859, that's when Charles Darwin introduced Origin of Species by natural selection and the favored human races. Did you know that today they only report half the title that Charles Darwin wrote?
Of the book. Listen, y'all.
His title had to do with favored human races assigning supremacy to the Aryan race, all others being inferior.
They had an agenda.
How many knew that? Only a handful. His book was racist, and that was the basic purpose for writing it.
So I'm gonna let him repeat the name of the book again, so you guys could look up Charles Darwin's book real quick.
The title that Charles Darwin wrote. His title had to do with favored human races assigning supremacy to the Aryan race, all others being inferior. How many knew that? Only a handful. His book was racist, and that was the basic purpose for writing it.
And people would still believe, people would still believe that what he did was all science. And I'm like, yeah, it was science, but it was pseudoscience. It was only made to fit his narrative. And people be bigging them up all the way down to the presidents. I showed y'all that, knowing that he was racially biased in his science. Yeah, science fiction. That's right.
1900s, the social engineering aspect of Darwin's theory became popular worldwide amongst many.
Look,
during the early 1900s, the social engineering.
Just in case y'all thought I was lying that they weren't together, Galton, Darwin, it's in their family. They're blood related.
Aspect of Darwin's theory became popular worldwide amongst many scientists alike, high-ranking politicians, and it even caught the eye of the elitists. More about this in the second installment concerning this topic. But I mention all of this to inform you that they played a prominent role.
Don't that look like doesn't that look like DNA strands? They're trying to connect you with certain people. But this is the beginning of it. And I was telling you guys that at this time where you saw the Francis Galton and Charles Darwin's theory being rolled out or carried out, okay, keep in mind, this was the beginning steps of that so-called genealogy DNA process where they trying to connect the dots or who you could be blood related to by way of eugenics, trying to socially engineer a way to think that you're related to a certain group of people. But they never tell you your blood relation. The reason why is because they weren't testing blood. They were going off of the structure of your skull, and I showed you the pictures of that. What you look like, how you act when you're studying, like when you're going through a literacy test. They're testing you in so many different ways, trying to see how you read, trying to see how you write, in order to categorize you in a particular class. Now, this is exactly what they are doing right now when it comes to genealogy DNA, when they say that they already going off of existing biobanks. Notice at the bottom of this picture, it says biological examination of these family stocks. Biological examination. But this is all inside of a book on eugenics. You guys could look this up by their own. They did this. This is their family though. This is how they were doing it for themselves, and they thinking that was going to work for everybody else. And it was pseudo. Straight up. It wasn't going to work for everybody else just because it worked for you. Notice how they got the pictures of everybody in their family. Allegedly.
In elevating the advancement of eugenics, specifically for the sake of their own race, disguised as if this was.
Get this, I'm showing it to you. Eugenics, get this. Policing everything. Policing everything. I don't think it was March 29th, 1906. I believe that might have been a library stamping it of when they scanned it in. So I ignore this date, the March 28, 1906. I don't think, even though it say born, oh, you know what? They referring to this person. Born 29 March 1906. But I don't know when this was published. But definitely get this.
At a cost of whatever they desire. They were religiously following this formula.
Lady Science, Volume 3, number 33. Get that. Get that.
Survival of the fittest. In other words, Charles Darwin's theory of human evolution was merely a way to elevate and escalate the implementation of white supremacy and to eradicate those who were of non-pale complexions, deeming it as survival of the fittest, where those who did not meet their racist criteria, motives, and agendas would suffer from a variety of forms of propaganda that was hypothesized to eliminate the opposing race of people. Eugenics is literally a modernized pseudoscience that was based merely on racial discrimination.
Look, Governor's Trophy, fittest family. Are they winning an award for being the fittest family? Look at where they're located. Watch this.
And environmental injustice, socially,
look at the top of the, look at the building.
But became prosperous still due to its popularity of praises.
They're at the Eugenics building. The Governor's Trophy, fittest family. Look, y'all. It was survival of the fittest. This is what's going on right now. Remember, okay, and I saw somebody in the comments, I mean in the chat, mentioning this before about what they did with the Nazis and everything like that. Very similar, but they were actually trying to force themselves at the top by way of their little science. Okay? Put them at the top, making them above everybody else so they can feel good about themselves to continue on with specified wrongdoings. Okay? Specified wrongdoings. They use science to their advantage. They made this shit, they made this up at the Eugenics building. The Governor's Trophy, the fittest family. This is not a game, people. And this is the origins of classism. That's what's going on right now. Pseudoscience. It wasn't real. They made that shit, they made it up.
From those who gravitated towards inequality and racial estrangement. On the date of September 25th, 2008, in a statement made before the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs by Representative James P. Morin on the grounds of the Thomasina E. Jordan Indian Tribes of Virginia Federal Recognition Act.
Watch this.
Morin stated, quote, "This is a travesty that this committee can correct. The second unique circumstance for the Virginia tribes is what they experienced at the hands of the state government during the first half of the 20th century. It has been called a paper genocide, at a time when the federal government granted Native Americans the right to vote. Virginia's elected officials adopted racially hostile laws targeted at those classes of people who did not fit into the dominant white society."
Now keep in mind, he's using the term Native American due to the fact that it's an updated statement. Like he gave this statement, what I say, 2008? So he's going to use the term Native American. But if you listen to what he's saying, he's talking about us. Let me make sure that was 2008. Yeah, that was 2008. So September 25th, 2008. Before the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs. One more time.
Circumstance for the Virginia tribes is what they experienced at the hands of the state government during the first half of the 20th century. It has been called a paper genocide, at a time when the federal government granted Native Americans the right to vote. Virginia's elected officials adopted racially hostile laws targeted at those classes of people who did not fit into the dominant white society. The fact that some of Virginia's ruling elite claimed to be blood descendants of Pocahontas, in their view, meant that no one else in Virginia can make a claim they were Native American and a descendant of Pocahontas's people.
Hold up, listen. I'm gonna repeat what he said. The fact that some Virginia's ruling elite claimed to be blood descendants of Pocahontas, in their view, meant that no one else in Virginia can make a claim that they were Native American and a descendant of Pocahontas' people. They telling on themselves. What are they doing? It's taking an identity. That's stolen identity right there. That's grand theft identity. Grand identity theft. And right after that, listen to what he's saying right after that.
To do so would mean that Virginia's ruling elites were what they decreed all non-whites to be. Part of the inferior Negroid race.
Woo! Hey, y'all. Are y'all listening? To do so would mean that Virginia's ruling elite were what they decreed all non-whites to be. Part of the inferior Negroid race. Come on, y'all. Notice he used the term Native American. All right? Remember, I tell you American Indian by way of the paperwork because the term Native American came later, 1970s. I also tell you that we should refer to each other as Niji, being my buddy, my associate. Remember, I told you not to use the word friend, even though I know we're gonna do it, and sometimes you may even hear me say it. But a friend is a person of the society of what? You just make sure that somebody got this real quick before I say it. Who is it, y'all? Remember, this going all back to their little religious beliefs. Society of Quakers. That's right. And we were not Quakers at all. Come on, y'all. So you know who he talking about. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
The fact that some of Virginia's ruling elite claimed to be blood descendants of Pocahontas, in their view, meant that no one else in Virginia can make a claim they were Native American and a descendant of Pocahontas' people. To do so would mean that Virginia's ruling elites were what they decreed all non-whites to be. Part of the inferior Negroid race. With great hypocrisy, Virginia's ruling elite pushed politics that culminated with the enactment of the Racial Integrity Act of 1924.
Listen, y'all.
This act directed state officials and zealots like Walter Plecker to destroy state and local courthouse records and reclassify in Orwellian fashion all non-whites as colored.
Woo! Y'all listening? In Orwellian fashion, all non-whites as colored, y'all. That's everybody. Because of Walter Plecker and the Racial Act of 1924. I already went over this, but this right here is public record. Also, the Racial Integrity Act was in 1924. It targeted Native Americans with a vengeance, denying Native Americans in Virginia their identity. But keep in mind, all of this happened in Virginia and streamlined everywhere else. He's just admitting it in court.
It targeted Native Americans with a vengeance, denying Native Americans in Virginia their identity. To call yourself a Native American in Virginia was to risk a jail sentence of up to 1 year.
What I tell you my grandfather told me, and a lot of other elders, what I tell y'all, they were being jailed or murdered for stating that they were Indian. Now right here, see, he's saying Native American, but that's not the terminology that was being used back then. It was Indian, American Indian. I think I mentioned that right here too.
End quote. Now in this statement, he used the term Native American.
Yeah.
But the truth is that our identities were changed not from Native American, but from Indian to colored.
Mm-hmm.
And they were not only jailing people in Virginia for claiming their true identity, but they were also killing them by hanging them from a tree, and in more ways than one that I won't mention. In each state across North America, the biggest bigoted, racist, white supremacist of them all was none other than Walter Ashby Plecker.
Here go the sucker right here.
The Plecker era was truly one of the darkest times for Native people in Virginia.
Walter Plecker, the role that he played is just like Fauci. The role that he played when it comes to the health of the Americans. Just look at him that way. Same role. Whatever Fauci said, the government ran with, and it streamlined to every state. If Fauci recommended that everybody wore a mask, and well, everybody should da-da-da-da-da, and woof, the whole government got it, all right, and they passing it down, right? Look at Walter Plecker the same way. Because he influenced that vital statistics. What'd that say right there? They listening to him. Dr. Plecker, they listening to him. The federal government is. So whatever he say, go. So they tested it in Virginia first, and then it streamlined everywhere else.
The Plecker era was truly one of the darkest times for Native people in Virginia. But I think it's critical for us to think about what was the genesis of the ideology that Plecker was a proponent of. And it's really the eugenics movement. The eugenics movement was a pseudo-scientific movement. We say pseudo-scientific today because we find that the science that they were proposing is not.
And she's of the Department of Anthropology at the College of William and Mary, with her PhD here, saying that eugenics is pseudoscience. Come on, y'all. Listen.
The Plecker era was truly one of the. It's critical for us to think about what was the genesis of the ideology that Plecker was a proponent of. And it's really the eugenics movement.
Listen.
The eugenics movement was a pseudo-scientific movement. We say pseudo-scientific today because we find that the science that they were proposing is not what we today would honor as scientific in any way. The eugenics movement has a direct link to the descendants of Charles Darwin.
See there?
They somehow made the leap to these notions about racial purity. What is best for each race is racial purity. Plecker and his friends convinced the Virginia legislature to adopt very restrictive legislation in 1924. It's called the Racial Integrity Act. With this legislation, it was decreed that there were only two possible categories. One is white, which means a person you check that you're white if you have white ancestry, Caucasian ancestry, and absolutely nothing else. The other category is everybody else, and that's colored.
Listen.
So this was very hard on Virginia's indigenous community because in a sense it wipes away their identity on paper. Their ability to describe themselves as Indian was not possible. To describe themselves
and they made themselves Indian. To describe ourselves as Indian was not possible. Don't forget that the elites did that. They called themselves the elites. Don't forget, by way of eugenics, they did that. They did that. That's it right here. I'm telling anybody that's doubting me, you know better now. You know better now. I'm telling you what's going on. I told you what happened. I'm not making this up when it's documented. God damn it, our people's identities were stolen. I'm trying to calm down. Our people's identities were stolen. We were told that we came from Africa when we were here this entire time. And they put themselves in our place. Purposely. That's why I said when there's people out there that's talking about white supremacy, y'all don't know what white supremacy is. Cause you ain't going to the goddamn source. And here it is. You gotta go to the source, y'all. I just need y'all to wake up, man. I need y'all to wake up. They just straight up took our identity and burned the records and gave the rest that they saved to the Mormons. The Mormons know who you are. That's why some of y'all Hebrew Israelites picking up their book. You know they talking about you. You goddamn right. You know they hiding the records in Utah. Wake up. When did we get the permission to take our records? They don't want you to talk about them because they scared that we gonna wake the rest of us up. That's why. And that wasn't that far ago. 1924. That was not that far ago. You don't even gotta go back to the pyramids or the mounds. We can stop right at 1924. And these bigots getting all the credit. Yeah, they know the history. You think they need to study this shit? You got another thing coming here. They know. Your ass the one that don't want to accept it. Well, that ain't happened in my family. Or we ain't talk about that. You ain't even ask your family. And every single one of us can recall that our ancestors said, or elders in the family said that we got Indian in us. You know that that was actually a thing? Seriously. Oh, girl, you got some pretty hair. You must got some Indian in your family. Turn right around and you ask grandma or grandpa, yeah, girl, yeah, we this, we that. Indian. It won't ever fail. You heard what I said? I said it won't ever fail. It won't ever fail. We are more Indian than anybody. We are the indigenous people. We are the Niji. This is us. It ain't nobody else, because ain't nobody else get misclassified more and reclassified more than us. Nobody. We got misclassified, reclassified over and over. Nobody, that's not telling you nothing. But if we was Africans, then how come they ain't put us down as Africans? Let me say this loud. How come they ain't put us down as Africans day one? I'm gonna say this again. Hold on. Let me back up and scream. Maybe you didn't hear that. Hold on, let me bring this up. Hold on. How come they didn't bring us and say, okay, we're gonna mark you down as Africans day one? I hope you can hear me back there. They wouldn't have wasted time with no goddamn census. They would have said, y'all niggas Africans, day one. They not gonna wait, hold on. They not gonna wait until 1960s to tell you you are African. How come they ain't put African on the Racial Integrity Act? She said 2 categories, right?
Legislation, it was decreed that there were only 2 possible categories.
2!
One is white.
White!
Which means a person, you check that you're white if you have white ancestry, Caucasian ancestry, and absolutely nothing else.
Nothing else!
The other category is everybody else.
And that's colored.
So that this was...
Where's the African? I can't find it, y'all. Help me find it. Well, I can't find... Hold on. Is this it right here? No, it's not. Wait a minute. Is this right here? Let me see if it's up under this rock. No, it's not up under this rock. Where's the African? That does not exist, man.
Very hard on Virginia's indigenous community, because in a sense it wipes away their identity on paper.
Hold on, look. Hold up. And shout out to my haters. You know why? The reason why is because my haters are even helping me out. Because they know for a fact that they don't know nothing about anything that they can regurgitate. So go ahead. Hate. Because regardless, you're going to wake up. And if you're not, trust me, we don't need you. We only need 13% of our own people to get this done. You in the way. We don't need you. Stay there.
For their ability to describe themselves as Indian, was not possible. To describe themselves as Indian was not possible.
Keep in mind that our elder family members' birth certificates were changed multiple times to state colored, Negro, mulatto, and now black or African American as their classifications of racial identity by way of the federal government systematically. So the moral of this segment is that you have been lied to by your government, your president and politicians, your news media, your school teachers, college and university professors, your public school history curriculums, multiple out of Africa theory books, and even by the very people that share the same hue as you and I. And that's a whole nother story within itself. Now, I challenge each and every one of you to seriously research your mother or your grandmother or your great-grandmother's birth certificates right now. And if it has the letter C or COL dot or colored and every other misclassified title of race created by the government that I just mentioned, then at that moment, you will know the absolute truth about who you really are.
Period. It's go time, Slim.
I'm just here to make you think.